Welcome. Thank you all for coming. That was a really wonderful talk, and I think we all learned something from the last talk, and I feel like the Swedish organization up here with Bonnie. I'm Wendy Ogilvy. I'm the Director of Environmental Programs with the Grand Valley Metro Council. This is Bonnie Broadwater, and she is the Stormwater Coordinator at the Metro Council. And today we are going to talk about municipal collaborative approaches in municipal stormwater management program that we have. But first I wanted to I'll give you a little bit overview of what we're planning to talk about. We're going to tell you a little bit about the Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds. And then we're going to talk about how that organization and the watershed has enabled us to do this collaborative approach in stormwater management. We'll talk about some of the permitting activities and how those are coordinated throughout the region, and then some of the regional importance of the work that we're doing right now. So I don't know if any of you were in our talk yesterday about green infrastructure in the Lower Grand River watershed, so we might have a little bit of repeat here. But just so you know where you are right now, you are in the Lower Grand watershed, Lower Grand River watershed. The river's right out there. If you haven't looked out the window, it's a mighty river flowing past our windows here. The watershed itself is geographically, hydrologically cut off at Portland, Michigan, which is the confluence of the Looking Glass River and the Maple River. And just as far as, because it's a huge watershed. The Grand River watershed starts, actually its headwaters in Jackson, and flows 252 miles. Oh, that was going to be a quiz question, but it flows through 252 miles to the outlet to Lake Michigan. We have all or parts of 11 counties in West Michigan, and we have major subwatersheds of the Rogue River, which is in the red, the Flat River in the brown, and then the Thornapple River in the blue. And the rest of the area is almost direct drainage into the Grand River, but you can see the different colors in the major subwatersheds there. We've divided it out into 31 subwatersheds, which we call our subwatershed management units because it is such a large watershed. The Lower Grand is about 3,000 square miles, so big area to manage. And so by dividing it into these other subbasins, they're a little bit easier to manage, to look at the specific pollutants, sources, and causes, and then also to be able to measure some of the improvements that we would be doing within these subwatersheds. It's a little bit of close-up of the river. The Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds is the umbrella organization to try to help manage all the activities and measure improvements that are happening in the watershed. We have several very active subwatershed groups, which we try to continually coordinate with and provide updates and provide links on our watershed website. And also just using our experience and our resources that we have at this level to help them and leverage some of their resources. But I feel we have a pretty strong relationship with all of the subbasins and work really well together, and that's part of the whole collaborative approach of the Lower Grand. And the Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds is an agency of the Grand Valley Metro Council. It's a little confusing in the conference here. They couldn't figure out if we were ELGRO or the Metro Council and how they were supposed to figure this out. But it is an agency of the Grand Valley Metro Council as part of its environmental programs. But the Lower Grand River, we call it ELGRO for short. It was formally organized. It had been bringing people together since about 2003, but formally it was organized in 2008 with bylaws and articles of organization to figure out how best to manage this huge watershed and to get as much involvement as we could. So the membership consists of water managers who are agencies or organizations that have a discharge permit. So any agency, any organization, any facility that has a NPDES discharge permit can be a member of ELGRO and be on the board. We have another group of just the subbasins. So any subbasin or subwatershed that has some sort of organization, either they have a project, so they have some sort of committee, they might have a board, some leadership, then if that watershed has some sort of organization, they can be members and members of the board. And then we just have an opportunity for other organizations or individuals to join ELGRO as well. But But out of that, because we had this strong organization, and within the organization we did develop a watershed management plan that was approved at the federal level in 2011, which opens up a lot of funding opportunities and just a plan for the whole watershed to move forward. But because we had this strong organization and we had a plan, when Michigan offered in 2003 a watershed permit to administer the MPDES Municipal Separate Stormwater Permits, we'll call them the MS4s, we took that as an opportunity to continue to work together to implement these stormwater permits. And Michigan was only one of 2 states in the entire nation to offer a watershed permit. So through that collaboration, we were able to all come together, and originally we had 46 communities. And Bonnie's going to talk more about how that all happened, but we're still together, and so it really provided an opportunity for expanded collaboration in this very large watershed. So Bonnie, I'm going to hand it off to her to talk about the actual stormwater permit and how we go about doing it with all these communities.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I'm Bonnie Broadwater, and I am also with the Grand Valley Metro Council. And before we kind of delve into the specifics of the stormwater and how we're collaborating as a watershed on our permit, I'd like to just give you a really quick background on the NPDES program for those of you that are not familiar with it. Back in 1972, when the Clean Water Act passed, EPA began their enforcement with focusing on point source pollution. So when we think about point source, we think about things like a factory with a pipe that's draining directly into a river. And once they were able to begin regulating all those point sources of stormwater pollution, they then began to focus on non-point source, and that's where municipal government agencies came into the program. They began with phase 1 in 1990, and that brought large cities across the country into the NPDES program, cities like Grand Rapids. And then in 2000, they followed up with phase 2, and using census data, they then brought in smaller communities, like some of the communities that you see here on this map, shown in green, under phase 2. And as Wendy stated, the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality approached the EPA at the time that phase 2 began, and then here in the Grand River watershed, they approached them with this idea for a watershed permit. This is one of only 2 states in the country that has a watershed permit program, and it was a great fit for the Lower Grand because it really allowed us to not only be innovative, but to work together with those innovations, and we've seen a lot of really positive results from that. So you can see here in green, we have all of the communities that are currently still a part of our program. In total, there are 22, including the 2 counties of Kent and Ottawa, as well as many cities, villages, townships, and even a school district. And additionally, there are several school districts that are also nested under the jurisdiction, in which they are contained. Wendy had mentioned that originally we started out with over 40 permittees. There were some changes to the permitting program based on some court rulings, and so many of the townships found that they were no longer in need of a permit because of the fact that they did not own and operate their own municipal separate storm sewers. So those then fell under the jurisdiction of the operator of those storm sewers, which in most cases ended up being the county road commissions. So the county road commissions are still involved in our stormwater permit program, and they are still handling a lot of the stormwater requirements from those outlying areas in the townships that you can see shown on the maps. So next, I'd like to talk a little bit about our innovative approaches that I mentioned and the shared tools that we are using to implement those innovative approaches. We have 3 programs specifically that we've been collaborating the most on, and I'm going to talk about each of those in a little bit of more detail. But the first program is our Illicit Discharge Elimination program. And the purpose of this program was one of our permit conditions required us to do sampling of outfalls. And an outfall is defined as anywhere where the municipal separate storm sewer system discharges into a water of the state. And the reason that we were sampling these outfalls is because oftentimes when you sample outfalls, you will find something that we call an illicit discharge, which is basically anything that does not belong in the stormwater. Some things belong in stormwater, and some things don't. And so by sampling, we were hoping to find as many of the things that didn't belong and remove them. And we did this in kind of a two-phased approach. The first time we did the illicit discharge sampling was back in 2003 when the original watershed permit was issued. And there was a group of interns that walked every single water of the state within the entire urbanized area. They sampled every single outfall pipe, whether it be public or private. And we ended up with a huge amount of data and not very many illicit discharges were detected. So what we learned from that experience was this maybe wasn't the best way to go about this, but the permit was still requiring us to do this outfall sampling every 5 years. So the next time that we did the outfall sampling, we proposed an alternative approach. With the new outfall sampling that we did, we continued to use the urbanized area, and that was defined by the U.S. Census in 2010. The permit also required us during our second round of sampling to sample not only outfalls but discharge points. So that's going to be anywhere where one municipal separate storm sewer connects to another, so such as from one city to another, instead of just sampling the outfalls like we did previously. And what we looked at and we said, this is going to be a huge amount of data, and given the low return that we had last time, we don't think that this is the most efficient use of our resources. So our alternative approach stayed in the urbanized area. We proposed to sample only outfalls and then work through interagency cooperation to track any illicit discharges that we did find back upstream to the source. Because what often happens is as you work your way back up that pipe, you will see that illicit discharge will cross from one jurisdictional boundary to another. And so in order to convince the state that this was an effective method, we needed all of the communities to be on board with working together to identify and then eliminate those. And so that follow-up became a really critical component of the program. We also had input from our Data, Information, and Planning Committee. They helped design the alternative approach and then proceed with implementing it, getting the interns out there to do all the sampling. And that committee is a joint committee that works with both the MS4 permittees as well as ELGRO. And so that's just another example of this really critical collaboration that we are using to make progress with this illicit discharge sampling. So as you would expect, this time around, even though we sampled less points, we still found a very, very small percentage of actual illicit discharges, and we were able to follow up on all of those and identify the ones that needed to be resolved and correct those. And it was overall a very successful program. The state's really very happy with the results that we had, and I think that we did it in a very efficient way. We saved a lot of money doing it the way that we did. The next initiative that I'd like to talk about is our public education plan. The main focus of our public education plan has been delivering consistent messages. There were 9 objectives that were set forth in our watershed permit, and even though each permittee had their own individual certificate of coverage under the watershed permit, these 9 objectives were consistent for everybody. So when we created our public education plan, we really focused on creating a plan that had consistent messages for everybody, so that no matter where you were in the watershed, you were getting these same messages about the importance of protecting stormwater and what each individual person can do to help with that effort. Things like personal watershed stewardship, illicit discharge reporting, and proper household hazardous waste management. All of those kinds of things we focused on providing those messages. You can see here, this is a brochure that was designed for ELGRO by our staff intern, Brian Zuber. He's with Grand Valley Metro Council. He's sitting right over there. He did a great job. And you can pick one of these up if you're interested in seeing the full brochure at our Algro table out at the exhibit. But this has a lot of really great information about the watershed, as well as links to our website and our social media. And this has been a really important part of getting the word out so that people know when we're having these events, these outreach events, so that they can participate, attend, and receive the messages that we have to offer. Another thing we've collaborated on is we've pooled our resources. All of the MS4s share a common public education budget, and we use that budget to purchase a lot of public ed materials. You can see here a nice sampling of the materials that we offered in the last year. We've brought some of those to show you today. We've got our rain gauge, and maybe Wendy will pass that around, so if anybody would like to take a closer look at that. You'll also notice the little blue thing sitting on top of the bag. That is our USB drive, and we do provide some brochures and some educational articles, that kind of thing. We encourage our communities to post those on their website. We share them on the Algro website. But because we are an environmental organization and we are trying to conserve resources, we thought it really made a lot more sense, rather than printing off a million brochures, to load them onto these USB drives. And so this was one of our public ed outreach. We provided these USB drives to the permittees. They could use the information on them to distribute. There were also some things on there, like some hold messages that communities could put on their phone systems, just to share more information about the watershed, and we'll hear one of those in a minute. But also, the other thing I'd like to point out is, if you see on the right-hand side of the screen, we have the no dumping drains to waterway. Our storm drain marker program has been really successful. We order these, they're pretty much consistent across the watershed, and then next to the marker you'll see the long rectangles. Those are door hangers. So when we work with school groups, community groups, cities and townships, and they do these storm drain marking programs, they also put these door hangers out in the neighborhood. So when people see these storm drain markers when they're out walking their dog or getting their mail or the paper, they understand what they are, what they're for, and importantly also who put them there, which is Algro. So that's a really valuable opportunity to not just teach people not to dump anything down a storm drain, but also why they shouldn't. So we've really had a lot of success with that program. The markers are popular. Everybody always is interested in ordering them. And then just a few other things that we've done are the coloring books and the hats for kids. Again, a lot of these items are on display out at our booth. So if you'd like to take a closer look at any of these things after the presentation, you'd be more than welcome to do so. I embedded one of our water spots in the presentation, so we're going to listen to that now. And these were aired on WYCE, which is a local radio station. Wendy did some of the voiceover stuff at the end, so that's kind of exciting. She's like a celebrity now. So we'll just take a quick listen to that, and then we'll continue on with the presentation.
Water spots. Notes about one of our greatest resources.
Hey, Bob, what you doing?
Oh, just cleaning out the garage. I found these old cans. Hey, here's a can of turpentine. Do you want it? I'm not using it.
Nah, I don't use it either. Hey, what are you doing? What else have you dumped down that drain?
It's just some weed killer. I'm getting rid of it. Hey, it's just a storm drain.
Do you know where that goes? Straight into our water.
No. It goes to the treatment plant.
Not anymore. Not for years now. It goes in the storm drain system and empties into our creek. You know, you can take that stuff to the hazardous waste center.
Man, why didn't somebody tell me?
Well, Bob, somebody just did.
Call the Kent County Department of Public Works Household Hazardous Waste Program for details. 336-2570. The Water Spot Series is brought to you by Algro, the Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds. Find us online at lowergrandriver.org.
Okay, so our community outreach this year has really focused on attending events, getting the word out about what we're doing here in the Lower Grand and what the permitted communities are doing to improve stormwater. We've attended lots of festivals. We were at the John Ball Zoo Party for the Planet this year. We've done tons of farmers markets. We've gone into local schools. We've demonstrated with the Enviroscape, which is like a stormwater model that's manipulatable. The kids really seem to like that. And this community outreach has been really important because for the people that are receiving the message as well as for giving the message. It allows them to engage with each other and start that dialogue about what they can do to be good stewards of stormwater. With all of the community outreach and all the groups that we're working together with, we've really cultivated a lot of great partnerships. Here you can see the Enviroscape that I just mentioned. This is a really neat stormwater model. The Kent County Drain Commissioner's Office has one of these that we've used at a lot of the events. And it just allows the kids and adults to see really what happens when it rains to all of the stuff that's on the ground, and really to teach them what non-point source pollution is. All of our partnerships are unique. Each community has found partners within their jurisdictional boundaries that they really like to work with, and we've tried to kind of bring all of those different groups like libraries and school groups and community groups together for this common goal. And these partnerships have really allowed us to expand our message and to reach more people, because the common goal is that we improve stormwater quality, and so everybody is working together to communicate with that goal in mind. And that's one of the reasons our public ed program has been so successful. The last collaborative initiative that I'd like to talk about is our model stormwater ordinance. When we first received our watershed permit in 2003, another of the conditions was that we come up with a stormwater ordinance to regulate stormwater from developed sites. And so we developed a committee that worked together to create a model ordinance. The initiative was led by the Kent County Drain Commissioner's Office, and the ordinance had several criteria which are listed here. The post-construction controls and the design criteria were really geared toward the developers that were bringing in site plans so that they would know what they needed to do to address the stormwater on their site. And then the maintenance enforcement components of the permit, or excuse me, of the ordinance, were really designed to allow the communities to have a tool to deal with folks that were not following the rules. And when we put that all together, we came up with this really great model. We had widespread participation. Many communities in Kent and Ottawa County have used this model ordinance. They've customized it to meet the needs of their own communities, and they're enforcing it, and it's working. We're really dealing with stormwater as it comes in through development to prevent future problems down the road from increasing additional impervious surfaces. So the last thing that I'd like to talk to you about today is the Grand Valley Metro Council and how we are working with not only the MS4 communities, but also, and you can see all the logos here of all of our participating communities, but also all of the agencies that are housed under the Grand Valley Metro Council. One of the things that makes Metro Council special is that they work together on so many different initiatives. They don't just house ELGRO, our watershed organization, they also house a regional GIS, which has been very valuable in helping the communities map their stormwater infrastructure and get a better idea of what is out there. And they collaborate on a number of other initiatives as well. It's just how we do things in West Michigan. We're working together to meet our common goals. We collaborate on everything from the Regional Prosperity Initiative to the GIS, the watershed initiatives, even things like our consortium of ambulances. We just work together on everything because we get better results. So with that, I'm going to wrap things up. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer those. Yeah.
Stated. When these MS4 jurisdictions come together, how do they each individually fund stormwater? Is it general funding, or do they have stormwater utility fees? And then when they pool their resources, is it everybody puts in the same amount, or is it based on population and size?
Great question. So, yes, I will repeat the question. So, in Michigan, the question was, how are the communities coming together to fund this program? Are they funding it through a stormwater utility or from their general funds? And then once those funds are pooled into the watershed group, how is it determined who pays how much? Yes? Okay, so I'll start with the first part. In Michigan, the stormwater utility question has been a very tricky one. There's nobody currently in the Lower Grand that is using a stormwater utility. There's just really not been a lot of legislative or judicial support for implementing those in Michigan. And I think that everybody just wants to make sure that they have a program that they're able to fund and move forward with so that they can maintain compliance with their permits. So at this time, most of the communities are using general funds. Some of them have line items dedicated for stormwater. Some of them are just drawing it from the general fund. And we have a formula that we use at Metro Council to determine, based on the population, based on the urbanized area, the amount of watersheds, sub-watersheds. We look at all of these different pieces of the permit to determine how much an individual community will pay for their share of the watershed permit. But I would like to reiterate that everyone does have an individual certificate of coverage. So, yeah. Other questions? Yes.
So it sounds to me like you're similar to what in Southeast Michigan we have watershed councils. Kind of, I think, are you familiar with the watershed councils?
Yes.
And so, do you ever get together with the watershed organizations throughout the state? Do you see any value in a statewide association where organizations like yours can get together? And generally do great collaboration in the west side of the state. What about statewide?
Yep. So the question was, is ELGRO similar to the watershed councils on the east side of the state, and do we ever collaborate at a state level with other watershed groups? And we do participate in the Michigan Water Environment Association. They host 2 watershed-based events a year, and ELGRO has typically in the past been very involved in those. And we are looking for ways to collaborate at a state level. We do kind of have a similar set up in terms of the permittees working together with the watershed permit. It's my understanding that a lot of the folks on the east side of the state are using jurisdictional permits. So I think it kind of just depends, who specifically you're talking about. But we absolutely do value working together both at a local level and at a state level.
Maybe you just mentioned the lit manual, how that collaboration works.
Oh, absolutely. So when I mentioned the model stormwater ordinance, looking forward to, the next iteration of that for our new permit, we're going to be working with the lid manual that was prepared to utilize that. And that was an initiative that was put together by the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments as well as the state of Michigan. And we're going to be using that to help with our green infrastructure components of our ordinance going forward.